Even now?
We'll wait just sort of another minute here for people to get in the space. Lovely turnout tonight. I'm very grateful for you all showing up. Everybody excited for another convention? Second annual Diocese of the Great Lakes Convention. Whoop, whoop. We're going to have a full evening, so I will go ahead and get us started now. I'm Alan James, the Interim Executive Officer here in the Diocese of the Great Lakes, and I chair the Diocesan Convention Planning Team. And it's great to welcome you here to the first of three pre-convention meetings, chance for us to walk through sort of informationally the various things that will be coming up, particularly during the business session. So let's begin with prayer. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give thanks for the gift of this diocese, the gift of your church, in which we experience your grace and love and are empowered to share that same love with others. And we give thanks for the opportunity to gather in 2 weeks as the body of Christ in this part of Michigan, this corner of your creation. We ask you to be with us tonight, and may all that we do give honor and glory to you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
So a couple housekeeping things. One, I ask you, unless you are speaking, to please keep yourselves on mute, because otherwise Zoom likes to hop around to the latest sound. Secondly, because while not standing room only, we do have multiple pages of folks who are participating. So if you want to ask a question at any point in time, please use the raise hand function, because if you simply raise the hand that God gave you, we may not see you. So down under the React button, if you've forgotten where it is, if you click on the React, there'll be a thing that says raise hand. And if you click on that, it will pull up so that Rachel Rose, our Director of Communication, who's helping, she and I can see that and call on you to speak. So a little other sort of general information about convention. First, you are at the first of the pre-convention meetings. There are 2 next week, Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock on the 14th and 7 o'clock on October 16th. All the information at each of those will be the same. The only thing that will vary are people's questions. And so if you have other delegates or people in your congregation who are interested in participating, encourage them to come to whichever one of these they'd like. Also, Rachel will be posting tonight's online. And where would they be able to find that, Rachel?
They will be able to find that on the pre-convention meeting page of the convention website, which I will post a link to in the chat.
All right, thank you. We have 2 important upcoming dates. The first is October 10th. In 3 days, that will be the registration deadline. Now, the thing that I want to say is, if you have delegates or people who need to register, please do it by the deadline. If sometime between the 10th or the 24th, something happens and one of your alternates needs to become a delegate or you need to make some other change, please contact the office right away. Don't wait till the 24th, because that will help facilitate a smooth registration up front when we all arrive. So again, the registration deadline itself is the 10th, but please let us know if you have changes you need to make whenever you're aware of that. And you are putting a link, is that correct, Rachel, to registration? Also, Rachel will be posting now a link to the in memoriam submissions as a part of our Diocesan Convention Eucharist. There will be a time when we'll remember those members of our diocese who have died and gone to greater glory and not God's nearer presence during the Eucharist. So please, if you could submit any names of folks in your congregations who have died in the last year since last convention, please follow that link so we can include them. Speaking of registration, so the simple sort of demarcation is if you or anyone is coming on Friday night or Friday, any day, any part of Friday or Saturday afternoon, any of the events at the Horizon Conference Center, one needs to be registered. If you're simply coming to the Convention Eucharist on Saturday morning at First Presbyterian Church in Saginaw, you do not need to register, right? So location will tell you whether you need to register as a delegate or a visitor or not. The general block of the schedule, Friday, registration will open at 9 o'clock. In the morning from 10 till 12:15, we'll have 2 blocks of workshops, including a couple listening sessions led by the Bishop's Search Committee. And if you look on the webpage, it will explain all of the listening sessions, including the 2 that will happen at Diocesan Convention. On Friday, lunch from 12:15 to 1:45 is on your own. So anyone who comes will need to find a locale for their favorite fast/semi-fast food on that day. The other meals, dinner and lunch on Saturday, will be a part of your registration fee. The opening of the general plenary, the opening of convention, will take place at 1:45 on Friday afternoon, go till about 5:30, with probably about the last hour of that will be with the presiding bishop, Bishop Sean Rowe, with some sort of questions and reflection on the episcopacy, being a bishop at this point in the life of the church. Bishop Rowe has a long history of his own episcopacy, and in talking with him, he'll share some of the sort of changes that he's seen, that while on the one hand, bishops have the same responsibilities, how they get executed have changed as the context of our culture and the church have changed over the last 20 years. Dinner will be at 6 o'clock and then Compline at 7:30. On Saturday, we will begin at First Presbyterian Church for the Convention Eucharist. The doors will open at 9:45. There are going to be some rehearsals going on before that. So if you can time it for 9:45, that will be the least amount of sort of traffic jam, and you can't get a seat before then. But then the Eucharist will start at 10 o'clock. At noon, for all the registered participants, whether you're a delegate or a visitor, if you've registered, lunch will be provided back at the Horizon Center at noon. And then we will begin the business session at 1. The plenary sessions and the Convention Eucharist will be live streamed on the Diocesan YouTube page. Workshops will not be, but all the plenary and worship will be live streamed for folks to watch either in real time or after the fact. Any logistical questions people have? All right, then I'd like to go ahead and call on Kay. Are you leading the resolutions tonight, or is Nancy?
Yes, I am.
All right, Reverend Kay Hauk, who is one of the co-chairs for Resolutions Committee.
Thank you. So I am Kay Hauk, rector at Emmanuel in Petoskey and co-chair of the Resolutions Committee this year with Nancy Mayhew. We had one resolution that was submitted to us, resolution number 1, which is separate from the amendments, the constitutional amendments that'll be addressed later. So this resolution 1 for our second convention was inspired by legislation from the 81st General Convention, which encourages dioceses to pay deacons a small stipend, honorarium, to allow them to have access to the church pension fund and all of its benefits, many benefits. So the resolution reads as follows. Resolved that the second convention requests that all congregations or organizations in the Diocese of the Great Lakes pay all active deacons amount sufficient to enable them to participate in programs offered by the church pension fund, and be it further resolved that this convention requests, beginning in the fiscal year 2026, all congregations or organizations in the Episcopal Diocese of the Great Lakes served by non-stipendiary deacons or priests pay such clergy a nominal honorarium of at least $25 per month and make corresponding contribution to the church pension fund of 18% of $25, excepting for those clergy listed as retired in the parochial report. And to add for clarity, at the time of having received that resolution, there were about 26 dioceses that had passed a similar resolution. Would this be a good time to take questions, Alan?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, any questions? All right. Thank you, Kay. We'll move on to diocesan nominations. Mary Simpson, Chair of the Nominating Committee.
I'm Mary Simpson. Work part-time at the diocesan office and was also the chair of the nominations committee. We have a lot of elections to do this year. So the first one that I see Rachel has up is for the secretary of convention. And that job is a one-year commitment from the close of convention until the next convention. The job is to record and preserve the minutes of the convention, to be part of our permanent history, and oversee the publication of the official journal of convention. And Mark Sullivan has put in his nomination for that position. Treasurer plays a vital role in stewarding the gifts entrusted to our diocese, helping to make sure that our resources are cared for faithfully and transparently. The commitment is a one-year term that is renewable. It's open to clergy or lay. They receive, safeguard, and account for all diocesan funds, ensure accurate financial records for each fund, and provide reports and audits to the Diocesan Council and annual convention. And Reverend Jared Kramer is the nominee for that position. Standing committee. It's going to be an interesting year for this. It is not a normal, we have more positions than we normally would due to a vacancy. So the first people we have running are Reverend Derek Quinn and Reverend Chris Veldier, and they are running for a one-year position on an unexpired term. So the standing committee members serve as counsel and advice to the bishop, but as we know, there is no bishop now, so they are our ecclesiastical authority, and they're the governing body between conventions. Now, there will be 2 lay people elected for standing committee so that our balance gets straightened out of lay and clergy. So they are Dana Phillips, Pam Redinger, and Jason Smith. And there will be 1 clergy for a 3-year term, and that would be Reverend Jedediah Fox and Father Mary Short. On to council. The council position is a 3-year term with quarterly meetings. It's the work of vision, collaboration, and stewardship. It approves the diocesan budget apportionment model, oversees diocesan property, finance, and endowment, works with the ecclesiastical authority and other leaders to set strategy and policy for our common mission, supports congregations, ministries, and new communities of faith across the diocese. This year we'll elect 2 clergy members, 2 lay members, and 1 lay member to finish a 1-year term. And Freya Gilbert will be running for that 1-year term. Carol Moga and Ed Walters are the lay people running for diocesan council. Reverend Brian Chance and Reverend Brian Coleman will be running as the clergy for diocesan council. General Convention, it's time to elect our deputies for General Convention again. This year we'll elect 4 clergy deputies and 4 lay deputies, 4 clergy alternates, and 4 lay alternates. The convention is in Phoenix, Arizona, July 3rd through 8th, 2027. These people will represent the Diocese of the Great Lakes in the House of Deputies. They help shape the life of the wider Episcopal Church, from liturgy to governance to mission and ministry. And they work alongside the deputies and bishops from across the church. So nominees for lay deputies are Donald DeWalt, William Fleener Jr., Raina Hodder, Gloria Lara, Ellie Miller, Sarah Philo. And the clergy are the Reverend Jennifer Adams, Reverend Jared Kramer, Reverend Don Davidson, Reverend Jedediah Fox, Reverend Pam Lenardowitz, Reverend Tom Manny, Reverend Rada Michael, the Reverend Canon Nuria Parrish, Reverend Linda Shearer. The Provincial Synod meets every 3 years. Their next meeting is in 2027. It is the province is configured of 9 dioceses: the Diocese of Chicago, the Diocese of the Great Lakes, Indianapolis, Diocese of Michigan, Missouri, Northern Indiana, Northern Michigan, Ohio, Southern Ohio, Springfield, and Wisconsin. And the work that they do is to network and support local ministries. We have 2 lay people and 1 clergy that are nominated for Provincial Synod deputies. Mackenzie Badenell, Nancy Foster are our lay delegates. Reverend J. Barrett Lee is the clergy delegate.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions about any of those positions? Great. Well, then I'll call on Reverend Dr. Jared Kramer and Sarah Philo to discuss finance issues year to date, proposed budget, and the proposed apportionment model.
Thanks, Alan. Let me flip down to that in my notes here as well. And we can get going. So the Finance Committee of the Diocese is a committee that is established by the canons of the church, and is filled by council. It's comprised of myself and Brian Chase, who's the assistant treasurer, and then Alicia and Alan James, our Diocese Council vice chair and interim executive officer, along with Sarah Filer, our CFO, all serve kind of ex officio. And then the other members of the commission would be Gary Grin, Gloria Laga, Carol Mago, Father Derek, Deacon Pat, and Father John. And it's a wonderful group. Our goal always is to spend a couple hours working through financial matters so that diocesan council can hopefully spend only about 15 to 20 minutes working through financial matters. And they really do an excellent job looking at things carefully. I'm really pleased with where we are as we bring this report to you. Our diocesan finances are steadily strengthening. We've got some reporting that we've been clearing up. Reconciliations are getting caught up. I believe, are improving transparency. And so I really think we're on a solid path of moving forward together. Bringing together two entire financial systems and kind of smushing them into one was a Herculean task. And our CFO, Sarah Philo, and her team have been working so hard to get us where we all want to be. And I'm so grateful for Sarah and the immense work she's been doing. And so, yeah, we are getting closer to where we want to be in terms of getting those regular quarterly reports, and being able to be the best stewards we can of our finances. Our goal, of course, is to get to a point where we're reconciling on a monthly basis and we're reporting to council very cleanly on a quarterly basis. We have a goal in the future of moving to a different accounts payable system that will make that a lot easier. That would be RAMP, is what it's called. I will say, if you have a church and you're interested in doing a different system, I cannot commend RAMP to you highly enough. It's a very, very solid cloud-based accounts payable system. And so once we get all the finances in order, we're going to move in that direction. Our unrestricted net assets are probably around $1 million. We've had some issues with the way the balance sheet was tied out with various funds. The line of unrestricted net assets was not actually all unrestricted net assets, because there were some restricted assets that had got tied into that. So we're working on untying that with the help of our auditor and making sure we always have a real clear picture of what we do have as unrestricted net assets as an organization. We also have created a subcommittee to simplify the balance sheet. We have a lot of funds, as you would imagine, that are board restricted, and are really duplicative, and even some donor restricted funds that are kind of duplicative as well, from the two dioceses. So we want to bring as many of those together to make it as clear as we can see, and ensure that if we have money in a designated fund or a restricted fund, that it's not just sitting there, making the balance sheet look fat, but instead that the funds that we have are going to ministry that we are all doing together. When we look at the financials itself, as we've seen them year to date, the most recent financials we reviewed were at the end of the second quarter. Obviously, we just finished the third quarter, so we're not there yet. But as of end of the second quarter, apportionments were lagging a bit. It's common at this point of the year. One of the goals we have is to set up a monthly ACH system for parishes that want to pay their apportionment that way, so you don't have to worry about remembering to write a check and get all of those signatures and get it sent. It can just be a monthly ACH draw, which we think will help with that. We've done some underspending in a few ministry areas. Part of that's just due to communications and Rachel's bandwidth with the stuff she's done and needed to focus on as we've been coming together as a new diocese. Also, some delays in hiring off staff that created some cost savings for us as well. We've also got some places where we spent more than we anticipated, IT, phone systems. Largely that is related to the coming together, and we don't anticipate most of those overages continuing as we move forward to the future. If you want to look at the financials, because you are really excited to do that, at the bottom of your screen, you can see a tiny URL and a QR code, and you can look at the whole big document. And if you have questions on it, you can feel free to ask me, email me. I'd be happy to answer those. And if you have any right now, I can even, do my best before we move on. Not seeing any hands go up. All right, we're going to move forward into apportionment. So I wanted just to talk about just how we use words is so very essential for who we are as a people. That's kind of fundamental to Anglicanism. In the Elizabethan settlement and the coming together of our tradition was this idea that words matter, and the way we use words is going to affect the way we see one another in community. So the word apportionment is an important word. I really want to emphasize an apportionment is not a bill. It's not a tax. Apportionment is our shared commitment to one another. It's how we as a diocese pool our resources so that every parish and ministry can thrive, how we live as one in the body of Christ and ensure when one part flourishes, all flourish. It's a really essential part of our community as a diocese. A budget is really a tool for mission. The greatest way to understand what an organization cares about is to see its budget and see where they're spending their money. Our goal in the budget is to align our resources with our calling, to embody Jesus's love with grace, hope, and joy. The money we use is hopefully being used to equip leaders, to strengthen our congregations, extend our witness, and respond to the needs of our neighbors. And so everything that we're doing is kind of falling along those lines, and that's what we're trying to do. When we tried to create a possible apportionment, we looked at a lot of different models, both back in the Building Bridges era and also in this past year. I was a part of both of those because I've been treasurer for that long. And to balance our budget, we need about about 1.5 million in apportionment. The legacy systems get about 1.3 million. So if you can do math, they're about 200 short. Initially, we thought of wanting to do the flat 10% model. That would be the model that the Legacy Eastern used. We liked that, but in the end, it's still left with a shortfall. And so we looked instead of the progressive model that Western uses, which would be you pay a certain percentage on the first, $100,000 of income, and then on the next, a different percentage, and so on and so forth. And that enabled us to get closer to where we needed to do. And we also decided, just kind of theologically and pastorally, that we really affirmed the progressive model. We are a diocese that has got a lot of small congregations that are barely struggling to kind of keep things going, and they need help and assistance. One of the ways they get that is with a robustly funded diocesan staff that helps those small congregations. The other reality is some of our larger congregations that do have more resources, we can use that blessing and turn that into strategic investment in our smaller congregations through a progressive system. So that's the system we wound up going with. But we started at 8% for the smallest parishes, which means that every parish that exists in that first tier of income is going to see an apportionment decrease, unless you had some crazy growth over the past year, in which case you might see a slight increase. But odds are you're going to see a decrease down to 8%. And one way of thinking of this is it's kind of similar to, and I know I said I don't like talking about apportionment as taxes, but the problem with like a flat tax system is that it asks too much from the poor and not enough from the wealthy. And so you can think of it that way as well. So this 8% system lessens the burden on our smaller parishes, while also recognizing parishes with more resources can hopefully help shoulder some of that burden. After that, it goes up by 2% for each additional $100,000 of income, capping out, I want to say, at 14% at the highest. The result of that is our larger parishes do contribute more. Smaller parishes get some relief and more diocesan support through the funding that we're doing for program and ministry, which is the goal that we decided we wanted to get. We also wanted to run that model not just theologically and pastorally, but what's the actual financial impact going to look like? Most parishes under this model are going to see a reduction of apportionment of more than 5%. 68% of Legacy Eastern, 70% of Legacy Western are going to see a reduced apportionment. Some parishes are going to see an increase, especially a few of the larger Eastern parishes who previously used to be on that flat system. Naturally, moving to a tiered system on those parishes is going to be a larger increase. That's going to affect a few parishes. But then what helps is our canons specify a rule about, I call it the rate break, which is your effective apportionment rate can never increase more than 2% in any given year. So, for example, if a Legacy Eastern parish was previously paying 10%, they cannot pay more than 12%. We can't increase more than that. And that kind of slows down the movement we're getting to ensure it's not too significant of a step for anyone, hopefully. The goal and the result of this is it provides a bit more resources than either of the legacy systems did, but with a lighter burden on those smaller parishes, which was really a big part of our heart and our desire there. What the apportionment does is it's different for different size parishes in our diocese. For smaller parishes, it enables they have the support from diocesan staff, administrative resources, outreach help to do ministry they could not do on their own. For our mid-sized parishes, it winds up being really effective for things like vestry training, stewardship, navigating growth as they are engaging that. For our larger parishes that probably can, for the most part, kind of run on their own pretty well, it enables them to be a part of justice initiatives, specialized ministries, and share the gifts that they have in their congregation with the wider church in our diocese. If you have questions on the apportionment, I'll take them now, obviously. You can also go to a QR code link that I've got, which is on, it's not here. There's a different QR code link for, unless, did you put them all together? Because I made two of them. I made one for financial.
This one is actually for apportionment and budget. It's just labeled incorrectly.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, you can get to this QR code to get the apportionment and budget information. And when you get to that, you can actually drill down. You can see exactly what your apportionment will look like under the new system next year. If you have questions about that, if you think we got something wrong, let us know. We're talking about 100 parishes, around 100 parishes, looking at 3 years of financial data. So that's 300 data points, and then calculations, getting it all out. So the odds that something went wrong at some point are not impossible. We found a couple corrections from the pre-convention meetings that we have now fixed in these new numbers. So please do take a look at those and make sure that you understand them, and that if you have questions, you can ask me. If they don't have questions,
Jared,
yeah, go ahead.
Jared, just to sort of point out, right, that at this point, this is what council is recommending, but convention will be voting on it before it's actually adopted and implemented, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the apportionment is not something that is ever imposed upon us according to our canons. It's something that we as a community affirm that this is how we want to fund the ministry that we do together as the Diocese of the Great Lakes. And so if you don't think this is a good system and you think that there might be a better system out there, then that's what convention is for, is to have those conversations and ensure that we're doing this the best way we can. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts on apportionment questions before I talk about budget?
Jared, I'll just say I put the correct link for the apportionment and budget document in the chat. And I will fix that for slides for the next pre-convention meeting and the slides that will be available on the pre-convention website.
It's kind of like the sermon that if your church has an early service and a second service, the sermon at the early service sometimes is different than the sermon at the second service, which can be kind of fun. All right, let's talk about the budget. The proposed budget that we put together is trying to align every dollar with our shared mission, which is strengthening congregations, supporting leaders, extending Christ's love in our communities. We continue to try to practice faithful stewardship to keep the deficit minimal, while also investing in ministries that will nurture faith, foster justice, and help every parish flourish to the best of our ability. We had some strategic priorities as we went into this diocese, this diocesan budget, largely flowing from the kind of draft mission statement and then our kind of current mission that we have that has been affirmed by diocesan leadership. We wanted to really ensure that what we're doing in the budget was supporting small parish vitality and new ministry development. We wanted to ensure that there was places for leadership training, for developing congregations. We wanted to ensure that we were being very attentive to justice and outreach initiatives. The world for a lot of us feels really broken right now, and we want to be sure that we are trying to be healers of the breach. And we also wanted to ensure that we were continuing our priorities diocesan-wise with youth and camp ministry, while at the same time recognizing that as we become a new diocese, we're going to restructure some of the ways that we do that. As you look at highlights of the budget, and like I said, you can go to that link and get into all the nitty-gritty if you'd like to. The income is based on the new apportionment model, endowment draws, designated funding. Legacy Western endowment draw is going up to 5%. In Legacy Western, that rate was determined each year based upon fund performance over previous quarters, and the fund performance has been stronger, and so it was an increase from 4.5 to 5%. Legacy Eastern has always just done a straight 5% draw. That draw remains the same for the coming year. I will say, just so you know, that we are in the process of putting into place new endowment policies, new investment managers, all of that. I'm hoping to be able to talk more about that at convention itself, perhaps, and if not, then soon after convention. Our projected revenue winds up being at 3.24 million, which is a little more than 10% increase from where it was last year, which is a good thing. That's money for ministry. Our total expenses are sitting at 3.28 million. That's a little less than last year. If you remember, or if you don't remember, because probably most of you don't really try to keep all of the stuff in your head, we had about a $200,000 budget deficit, I want to say, in the 2025 year. If we wanted to lower that deficit, we need revenue to increase, expense to decrease. So we did work on that with this budget. We also cleaned up some things that just had been carried over. So for example, in the early 2000s, there's this Millennium Development Goal thing that was coming from the United Nations. It was super cool. The Episcopalians were super excited about it. We're the only denomination that gets super excited about United Nations resolution. That's what I love about the Episcopal Church, right? One of the many things. That kind of moved on to its own thing. And so we don't really need to set aside money for that. We're doing the work of what was in those goals. We just do it differently now. So we kind of shifted that out. We reduced a few different areas that were focused either on local things or on ministries that didn't seem to actually be happening in the new diocese. So, for example, Together West Michigan is an amazing ministry, which is a local resource. When we remove that from the budget, it's not saying it doesn't matter. It's instead saying that we think that the better way of funding something like that is probably through something like a social service networking grant or one of the other mechanisms we have for funding those local initiatives better. Church Next networking events were both areas where we kind of created this, Church Next branding for faith formation offerings, and it didn't seem like anyone really used it. And so we probably don't need to spend that money on it. Same thing with networking events for us to have. That didn't really happen, so we probably don't need to budget for it. I want to be clear, that does not include the use of Church Next for anti-racism training. That is its own area, its own line of the budget that absolutely still exists. This is just for Sunday morning formation offerings, where we were letting every church in the diocese have access to something that they apparently didn't really need. We also did some increases, Plainsong Farm, social service networking grants from last year's budget. We didn't make them as much as they were requested, largely because we're still in a place of trying to build in those structures around things like companion ministries like Plainsong Farm. Eventually, there'll be agreements with those organizations in place and clarifications about how we fund, how long we fund, what area we fund, and that'll really help the budget process rather than the finance committee trying to just figure it out on our own. Social Service Networking Grants is a really cool ministry in Legacy Eastern, and it provides grants to a lot of amazing on-the-ground justice work. The goal that they had would be for that to double, because of course the diocese was doubling. The problem with doing that is that this is one of the only grants in our diocese that is funded by the general budget. It's not funded by an endowment. It's not funded by a designated fund. This is straight money from the budget, apportionments going into it. And so with already having a budget deficit, we didn't see doubling that, which would either increase that deficit or would require increased apportionments, or would require that we reduce other ministry areas to do those grants. So that we didn't see other ministry areas that we thought we could reduce to enable that to happen. So a little bit more for next year, but not as much as had been requested. We also had these great budget town halls. That was a new thing that we haven't done before, and enabled some great conversation about the budget. One thing that came out of that was, as we restructured our youth and camp ministry, the strategic decision initially was that we really need more logistical help with camp, so that Mackenzie can do the amazing work she does year-round, as opposed to kind of evaporating on the rest of the diocese during camp season, because she has to focus so hard on camp. So but if we want to give her that support, we need to find money for it, and it doesn't come from trees, as far as I know. And so we went ahead and shifted down the youth missioner system so that money could go into camps. We did hear, though, that there is a desire to have some more diocesan support for youth ministry. And so we restored one youth missioner into that system that would be a diocesan youth missioner that can assist Mackenzie by organizing some diocesan-wide youth things that'll happen. So that was one feedback piece that you gave us that we did put back in. Other highlights from the budget. Congregational development is an area in the budget that is funded by endowments, and applications for congregational development grants is going to be forthcoming along with all other grants. We have a subcommittee of the Finance Committee looking at every grant we have as a diocese and trying to find a very clear, streamlined place where you can say these are our grants, these are what they're for. Here's a super easy form for you to fill out to apply for that grant, and this is who makes the decision. So we're hoping to get that up and running by the end of the year, so it'll be rolling for you in 2026. I mentioned social service networking grants already. I mentioned Plainsong Farm already too. We also had a lot of energy in the budget request system for campus ministry, which is wonderful. $90,000 in requests. In addition to the part of that it includes $20,000 that we had also funded for campus ministry at Canterbury MSU before. We decided to defer those requests for now and to set them at zero. Not because we don't value campus ministry, which you may think that's tricky. You just said a budget is a value document. I absolutely did. We do value campus ministry, but there's not a diocesan strategy for funding it from the general fund budget. And so we really felt that these ministries were better suited for existing grant opportunities that did exist. So either through a congregational development fund or through a social service networking grant, that we have those grants to enable congregations to kind of engage in that work. We have not, as a diocese, created the decision that we're going to do campus ministry that's diocesan funded, particularly because then we'd have to decide what colleges do we do that at, and that could be a cool thing to do in the future. I'm a big fan. I became an Episcopalian while I was in graduate school, so I really believe in campus ministry. But given where we are now as a diocese, it seemed that was better suited for a grant system as opposed to a diocesan budget system. Because again, once more, if we put all of those in, then we'd have to either increase apportionments on all of our parishes even more, or we'd have to cut other ministries, or we'd have to have an even larger deficit. And it seemed that putting those into grants as opposed to putting it in the budget just made more sense for us at this point in our diocesan life. In the end, when we look at the budget, when it comes down, we have a projected deficit of around $39,000. This is my daughter, Lucy, who apparently wants to join the presentation right now. Hi, Lucy. That's less than 1% of our net assets, and is a lot less than the 200,000 deficit we used to have. So I feel like as a committee, we felt like that was a safe place to be. We're going where we need to go. Much better than the 2025 numbers. The budget, we believe, does align with our mission and vision while tightening the deficit that we had in 2025. And we really believe this apportionment system does ensure equity across parishes and that we're using our money strategically and faithfully. Questions? None. It was or you're sleeping. Somebody wake everyone up because Constitution and Canons is next, and that's even more exciting.
Thank you, Jared. And actually, we're waiting for the Chancellor to sign in here from another commitment. And so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And Jared, would you, since we have a moment here, would you be interested in speaking on the resolution that you will be bringing to the floor of convention, should convention so vote to allow it?
Sure, thanks, Alan. It is in the chat. There's a link to it. If you can't find the chat, it's just tinyurl.com/EDGL sanctuary. EDGL capitalized, and it's the first letter, sanctuary capitalized. This didn't get in by the deadline. That's my fault. But it's also because the need kind of got more profound after the deadline happened. Some of the things happening with ICE, I mean, they've been scary all year, but they've really ramped up in these past few weeks in ways that are deeply disturbing. I know to me, to members of my parish actually made the decision to become a sanctuary church. We're actively participating with Indivisible Grand Haven in establishing a sanctuary network. We're cooperating with Grand Rapids and the rapid response team they have there. And so this is the resolution, and thank you for putting it up on the screen there. It is a long resolution because there's a lot to say that I think is important. And a lot of people you'll see in the names below had suggestions for stuff to put into it. So I'm not going to read it to you right now. You can read it yourself. I hope I'll get to read it at the floor of convention if you all will entertain it. It really basically is drawn primarily from the migration with dignity principles adopted by General Convention. And it says that we as a diocese support the principles our church has said. It says that we believe this is a moment for us to respond to issues of immigration, issues of sanctuary. It also is helpfully would tell our diocesan staff this is something we want to do. One of the realities we have right now is without a bishop, it's hard for our diocesan staff to kind of move in a new direction on a project because they don't know how supported it necessarily is. And so this is saying, us saying to staff, hey, we think that there are significant human rights issues going on right now, and we want our diocese to be responding to this. Parts of this resolution were also drawn from similar language passed in the Diocese of Chicago and 2 different conventions they've had there. So that's in there as well. One of the things I'm particularly excited about with this resolution is that there are scripture references that are linked, and there are General Convention resolutions that are linked. Both of those are things we value in the Episcopal Church, right? Because a lot of Episcopalians don't know what General Convention has already said about this. When our church considered sanctuary, becoming a sanctuary church, what really tipped us over the edge was we saw all of those General Convention resolutions and we're like, oh, well, this kind of makes it easier. Our denomination has already said all of these things. We need to respond. And I will say, in addition to hoping that you will vote, you all will have to vote for me to even read the resolution in and to consider it. It'll be a motion I will make to suspend the rules to do that. If you do have questions about it, feel free to ask me. If you want to be listed as a signatory to the resolution before the final version gets filed, you can give me your name. You can put it in the document itself, and we'll ensure that it is included there. And after, if the resolution, well, whether or not the resolution passes, if your congregation wants to do something in these issues, let me know, because I'd be happy to connect you with people. You can email me. A great question. How do you notify me? I'll drop my email address into the chat. You can also catch me on TikTok at Father JNFam, whichever you want to do. Send me messages that way. And yeah, we'd love to have more people on there and to take this step as a diocese.
Thank you, Jared. Nuri, I know it's sort of on the spot, but do you want to say anything about where sort of diocesan efforts are at, or to share your work in conjunction with the Diocese of Chicago?
Certainly. I received word that there was a member of the Episcopal Church who had been detained in Chicago and transported to the North Lake Detention Center and was requesting clergy visits. And I think I received that word about 2 weeks ago, and first I went to see him and then coordinated a visit by one of his priests from Chicago and with him. So we went together and brought him communion. And then I am not sure, and maybe Alan, you know, whether his bishop was able to visit him today, but that was also in process. So my current understanding of my role is that my role is to provide pastoral support to William as he is detained within the boundaries of our diocese, and to coordinate pastoral support by others. And so that's what I've been doing. And in addition, I received a reach out to help clergy in the Grand Rapids area learn about what had been happening in the Lakeshore, and that was a reach out to a few clergy that I was part of. And my sense, I'm reading this resolution in its current form for the first time, along with all of you, and I appreciate the scriptural references and the General Convention references and the opportunity that the diocese may have to make this decision. So along with Alan and Jared, I say you'll be voting on whether or not you want to consider this resolution, and then you'll be voting on if you decide to consider it, you'll be voting on it, and it certainly provides more clarity than we currently have if this is the direction you choose to go. Is that what you were looking for me to say, Alan?
Yeah, that's good. I think to give folks the background so they understand sort of both what's happening sort of in real time,
Yeah.
and also to sort of be able to sort of hear some of the implications for staff that Jared was pointing to.
And
And I
let
can't,
me add one
I-
other thing, which is when I was most recently at North Lake, which is not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, in talking with one of the staff as we were waiting to be able to visit William. And the ENS just did a story on him today or recently, so I will drop that link in the chat. So one of the members of the staff came out and among other things told us that they had 555 people detained there at that point in time. And I know from the internet that they have beds for 1,800. So the first time that I was there, I saw about 5 people come in when I was waiting and ask for HR. So my hypothesis is that, they are expecting increased detentions and increased, more people will be sent there. So I ask you to pray for us, whatever you decide about this resolution. Pray for people in North Lake, pray for our diocese that has us within its borders, and pray that we know how to respond wisely to the time that we're living in.
Thank you. And I can report Bishop Paula Clark was able to see him today, and had a good visit, although it was a lengthy one, so to get through it all. The Chancellor, anyone have any questions either for Nuria or Jared on the resolution before we move on to our esteemed Chancellor? All right, Bill Fleener, if you'd please walk us through the Constitution and canonical changes that are being proposed.
Hello, everyone. You are well. So we have a couple constitutional amendments and several canonical amendments. It seems like a lot, but I have talked to chancellors who've rewritten their canons, and the fact that we have this few is looked upon as a good thing. So I feel good that for the most part our canons have served us well. We all knew that as we lived into these canons and into a diocese, we would have to make some changes. There's a couple that's an oversight, couple of problems we knew last year and put off till this year. So that's what we're looking at. So as we walk through these, the language is in the booklet, the language is on PowerPoint, so you can follow along. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in. The first one is a amendment to the Constitution. So if you were at convention last year, you'll remember that the proposal was to have language that the canons superseded bylaws. People rightly thought that that was problematic language. It seemed to leave the bylaws with no authority, which obviously wasn't the intent. So we have rewritten that requires that that the canons are binding, and that if there's conflict between the canons and the bylaws, the canons prevail. I think the language is what we intended all along, but is a little clearer and hopefully more palatable to people. So that one is fairly straightforward. The second one arose not with us, but with the chancellor, who's the advisor to the current presiding bishop. So we had language in the section about bishops and kind of succession of bishops. That's what this canonical provision deals with. Who's in charge and who's in charge if they're not around and that stuff. And the language you used was that the bishop was, I have to look at the existing language to remind her because we've gotten rid of it. Oh, it says, in the absence of a bishop. And people were concerned that the absence of a bishop might mean that the bishop is out of town, out of the state or out of the country. Clearly not the intent of the canons that anybody would grab ecclesiastical authority while the bishop is still able to do that and just is not in the diocese for the moment, clearly still in office. And so we have changed the language and used language if there be one, that makes it clear that the succession that's called for to potential other bishops and eventually to the standing committee of the ecclesiastical authority only happens in the absence of a bishop. There just isn't one, not that they just went away for a little while. So again, fairly straightforward fix to language that other people identified as problematic. I will say, just as an aside, and just because when they started saying they had problems with this, we went and looked at the canons of a bunch of other dioceses, and lots of other dioceses use that language. So this is one of those things where you draw attention to yourself by going through the process we went through, and they pick on things that everybody else is doing. So we've changed it. It's probably better, but anyway. Okay. So then those two, as a reminder, those are both constitutional amendments, and so they have to be passed twice at successive conventions. So we will pass them hopefully this year, and if we pass them again next year in identical language, they will then amend the Constitution. The canonical amendments only require one passage, and so they're offered to be the final language in the canons as they're amended. The first one has to do with a kind of an idiosyncrasy. There's several of these we had differences in the way we went about things when we came together. A parish's decision to sell property in the canons that we wrote, that we now have, did not require a vote of the parish. At least one of the dioceses before the merger did, and we, in thinking about that, thought that was important. So that the rector and the vestry alone don't have the full authority to, obviously they have to get permission of the bishop and standing committee, but they don't have the only parish authority to act in that case, that you should get a vote of the vestry to do that. And then we added on some language. Some people are concerned about the way this language works. It's been language that's been in there for decades, but it does talk about alienation, which technically a lease is an alienation. You're giving away some of your rights to the property. And so people were concerned about, we rent it out to somebody for the weekend, or we have a school that uses 3 rooms in our building. Is that an alienation and have to be approved by the standing committee and council? So we added language that short-term leases that are not for the building as a whole are not covered by this. So, if the parish is still in control of the building and using it and gives some portion of it out to somebody else in exchange for some income, that's not covered by this canon. They would not have to seek approval of the standing committee and the bishop. The second constitutional amendment, this was I just an oversight because I wasn't aware that this was happening. So the canon defined, we have congregations and seasonal chapels, and the canons treat them differently. Congregations, I think we're all fairly aware of, have full rights of participation in all the events of life, but they have their own management structure and vestry and things like that. Chapels do not. Chapels are under the providence of the bishop. They have bishop committees. They aren't self-governing. And so when we defined a chapel as a community of faith that doesn't meet year-round, we heard from a couple parishes up north who said, hey, we don't do services for a month or two in December because nobody can get out and we don't have enough people. And that clearly wasn't an intent to disenfranchise people who have been congregations for their full life and expect to continue to be. And so we changed the definition to say that they gather fewer than 6 months a year. And so that makes it clear that those congregations that have always been congregations and might take a month or two off in the winter are not chapels by that designation. We're talking about the 4 seasonal chapels that operate just in the summer and close down the rest of the year. Okay, the third canonical amendment has to do with filling vacancies. The language was not as clear as it might have been about how vacancies get filled. So I think most of us know that in most bodies in our church, if there's a vacancy during the year, that vacancy is filled by, if it's an elected office, is filled by the standing committee. The question arose of what happens when we have a vacancy on standing committee? Do they fill their own vacancies? And then the question arose of when that person fills that vacancy, what's their term? Do they step in? So if somebody is 1 year into a 3-year term, there's 2 years left. Does the new person who's appointed step into the remaining 2 years? Or does that person serve until convention and then that position is elected at convention and the person who was appointed is free to run? We decided that that was the appropriate way to do it. They're elective offices. We think the convention should have a say who serves on our elected bodies. And so somebody who's appointed shouldn't then get to serve several more years in an appointment structure. If they want to be in that office, they should be elected as the other people are. It also makes a distinction between offices that are appointed and offices that are elected, because we do have offices that are appointed and we want to make sure that was understood. But that's the gist of that one. I'm either really explaining well, or I don't have enough canon nerds here tonight, or I'm not sure what. All right, number 4. Wait, I forgot what number I was on. Yes, number 4. Oh, I will say that that's why I'm confused. There are 2 provisions to complete the process for this thing I just talked about. We'll vote on them together, but there are provisions both in the designation about what the standing committee is and about elections. So there's language cleanup in 2 places, but it's all the same process and all effectuates the same purpose. That's why I was troubled, because I saw another amendment in there. All right, number 4. So both dioceses previously had finance committees, and I'm not exactly sure why we didn't write a canon for a finance committee, but people on council and on the finance committee came and asked us to write a canon for an endowments committee or an investment committee, and we decided that was probably not the way to go, to have a committee defined that works with a committee that's not defined. And so we defined what a finance committee is. This is pretty close to the way it's worked in both dioceses before the merger. So it's not anything new, and the way the finance committee of our diocese, current diocese, is working. So it's not a change. It's just making sure that we understand that what that is and that canon provides for it. And it also allows them to create subcommittees, so they can create a council can create an investment committee if they choose. Number 5 was an oversight. I'm not sure why, but we did not have a deadline for nominations for elective offices when those had to be submitted before convention. And so that's the purpose of this. It also makes a little more clear what the nominating committee's duty is. There have often been questions, is the nominating committee a screening committee? Can they say you shouldn't have nominated yourself, you don't get to be on the slate? And so we make it clear that the nominating committee's purpose, they are required to, anybody who self-nominates or is nominated by somebody else will appear on the slate, but they also have the ability to go seek out other people, looking for varied skills, if there are skills needed on the body that aren't currently represented, or to be more representational. They might be looking for geographic diversity, ethnicity, diversity, things like that to try and round out the slate. They are free to seek additional people, but they don't get to screen out anybody who's nominated or self-nominates. And the last one has been a long-term project of me and a bunch of other people. In the Diocese of Western Michigan, we had what is kind of pejoratively called a distressed parishes canon, a procedure for dealing with problematic parishes. It was not, well, let's say it was not uplifting. It did not encourage people to work together and collaborate. It was fairly heavy-handed. And so when we started writing this as a part of the new constitution, we just never were able to come to an agreement, just because it's a big project and we had lots of other big projects going on, and so we weren't. So if you'll remember, we asked for permission to study this for a year and bring you back a replacement for canons 1.7 and 1.8, which are those distressed parishes canons that we carried over from Western. Eastern didn't have anything related to this. So as we began writing, we decided we wanted to start with a set of kind of givens, kind of agreement about what a congregation is. And we started with what we had written in Canon 1, Section 1, that was adopted last year, because that's where our Constitution canons start, is some definition of a congregation, and realized that for the purposes of making sure that people are encouraged to be as much a part of our community and as vital as they can be, that list was incomplete. And so in order to use the standards for the rest of the canon, we had to change the standards in 1.1.1. And so the first part of this amendment isn't 1.7 and 1.8, the distressed parishes canon. It's a rewrite of 1.1.1, which we think more properly describes what we believe a congregation in our diocese does and is. And then we go on to amend 1.7 and 1.8, and we bring in by reference the standards that we have that we hopefully will adopt as 1.1.1. And then we set up a process whereby congregations can get diocesan support for falling short in any of the areas that we just talked about. If they recognize that we're not making it in one of those areas, they can ask the bishop or the standing committee, if we don't have a bishop, to provide some support to them to help them get to where they need to be, where they want to be in that case. There's also a second avenue where it can be initiated by the bishop with some checks by the standing committee. The process is the same, it's just who's initiating it. We do feel like we need some process for a bishop to recognize that a parish isn't meeting the standards that we hold each other to. And that parish may not be willing to admit that to themselves or reach out for help. And so the bishop has to have a mechanism to insert him or herself into the process in a way. Much more gentle. The old canon allowed them to kick out the vestry and take over running the parish. That's not what we're doing. We're hopefully setting up a mechanism where people will be supported to move into the expectations of congregations in our diocese. And so we have these 2 entry points. Those are set out in 7. And then 8 is what happens in the process there. Develop a plan. The plan has to be reviewed regularly. And then lastly, we have a process now for what happens if a parish decides that it's either the parish decides it's going to close, or the bishop can, with a vote of convention, impose a closure on a parish, which is pretty harsh. But we gave it to the highest elected, highest governing authority in our diocese, which is convention, would have to agree with the bishop on that. And so we think that the bishop is unlikely to do that if it's not appropriate, and would have to supply ample evidence of why that's necessary to the convention. And so it walks through the process for closing, notification, a ceremony of sorts to that's to signify the closing. And so again, the process for that to happen internally, for a vestry and the congregation to do that, and a process for convention and the bishop to do that if it was needed. And then some safeguards around that, making sure people are cared for, making sure people have arrangements to get to other Episcopal churches and things like that. So that's the new version of our canons 1.7 and 1.8, along with a redraft of 1.1.1, the kind of standards of being a congregation in our diocese. Questions? That was a lot. And I talk fast. Alan, do you want to call on people, or you want me to?
I can call on Jared.
I have a question on the finance committee canon, and I also have a question on the not distressed canon canon. So I don't know which I should, if it makes a difference what I do first. I guess I could do the finance one first. It's kind of a clarifying question. So the current canons established in the endowment committee that only has the job, I'm putting this in the chat too, to make sure I got the language right, that only has the job of oversight of endowment distributions and make recommendations for the draw based upon established guidelines and policy. And so as I'm hearing you, what we had suggested was that you brought in the canon for the endowment committee to also include investment oversight. That would make sense for that group to do that. But I'm hearing you say that rather than do that, you created the finance committee, and then with that, the finance committee would create a different committee to do investment stuff. Or
I don't think there's any reason that, so what we said is that we don't think canons should decide who's going to be in charge of the investments. We think the finance committee should have oversight of it. Obviously, whoever does that should report to council. The council could, through the finance committee, ask the existing endowment, appoint the endowment committee as an investment committee also. So the canon is written so that you guys have the authority to do that. Council has the authority to do that if they think that's right. But we didn't want to lock that in, and we see those as related but somewhat different kind of fiduciary duties. And there might be some value to having the draw separate from the finance committee and the draw separate from the investment decisions and things like that. So we give you the council the authority to make those determinations as they see fit.
that's helpful. So what council currently has is they've adopted an investment endowment policy, which names the endowment committee as the investment committee.
Yes.
And so because that's a council policy, then if later council wanted to change that, that would just be a policy change as opposed to having to go to convention, which is the easier way of being able to adjust as we adapt. Is that right?
That's what our intent was. Yes, I think that's exactly right.
That makes sense to me. My second question was on the not distressed canon. What is there a name for this canon? It's restoring health or plan of action. Sorry, I gotta call it by its right name. The uh, congregational renewal. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
So as I'm reading this canon, if you had a situation where the leadership of a parish was intransient and not wanting to respond to a plan of action, the only thing the diocese could ever move on would be a closure. It couldn't make any other changes within the life of a congregation absent closing the congregation if the parish leadership refused, which would be the key difference compared to the power that existed in the previous canon. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think we felt like the old canon gave the bishop a lot of authority to take over, and that didn't lead to healing and working together, or was unlikely to. And the few times it's been used, it didn't. And so our hope is that the plan of action will have lots of collaboration and lots of encouragement. But if people simply are unwilling to, then maybe they aren't an Episcopal congregation anymore. That's where we are. We didn't want to implement lots of heavy-handed stuff in that process because we really want it to be uplifting and collegial and collaborative. And so we just left the one out with the other hope that the other stuff fixes it all. And I think most bishops are going to be really reticent to bring such a motion to convention. So it's a safety valve, but really the whole idea is that we don't get there.
Was there any concern in your group that there would be situations where the diocese wouldn't want to close the congregation, but might want other ways of dealing with a situation where you have, some significant violations of canon or policy taking place? Or did you just feel there was just no way of doing that without feeling heavy-handed? Just curious.
I think we were worried about feeling heavy-handed. That was the impression everybody got from the old canon in Western, and it didn't seem helpful to the process that we really wanted to talk about, rather than beating up people for not doing what they're supposed to do, which is not what we wanted to be about. Obviously there are other opportunities for canonical violations and policy violations and things like that, but I don't think that we want to set up, and maybe we'll change it, live into it, and decide we need more. The bishop needs more authority, but we didn't want to start there.
Thanks, that's really helpful. I appreciate your work on it.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Bill?
Plus, Susan had a question.
Yes, and sorry, I can't find the raise your hand.
Okay.
So is all of this going to be printed at the convention to study, or are we supposed to download all of this? I was trying to take notes, but things went really quickly. So how do I get
Rachel
a written?
Yeah,
it is on the website and in the booklet. Rachel, I'll let you do this.
Yeah, it's on the website. It's and then these slides, once I correct the errors that of course you only see when you're showing them to other people instead of just looking at them yourself, will be available as a PDF as well, and it will be in the convention booklet. Susan, I will send you an email in the morning with a direct link to where it was to where it is on the website. It was also linked in the second call to convention if you have that.
Okay, thank you. I'm in my mid-60s and I'm trying to catch up with all this technology.
There's a lot of it. If you ever have any other questions, you can give me a call, or my email address is just Rachel, RACHEL @greatlakesepiscopal.org.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But to be clear on the other half of that question, this material will not be in hard copy paper form at convention.
So you have to print it yourself before you get there if you want it.
Any other questions for Bill on the constitutions and canons amendments? All right. So we have a few minutes left here. Any general questions about anything convention related? Well, I thank you all for your interest and participation tonight. I hope you are feeling fully informed and ready to come for a stellar event. I wish you all a good night. Take care, everybody.